Imagine holding a human arm bone in your hand and realizing it's stronger than the arm bone of an Olympic-level rower. Now imagine that bone isn't from an athlete at all. It's 5,000 years old. It belonged to a farmer. In 2017, a team at the University of Cambridge did exactly that. They measured the bones of Neolithic women and lined them up against modern female rowers, runners, and soccer players, people who train for hours, every day, for years. The prehistoric women didn't just hold their own, they beat them. And that single result is about to unravel almost everything you think you know about what cavewoman life actually looked like. Here's the thing, though. Bone strength alone doesn't explain why. To understand what these women were actually doing with their bodies, we have to go back to how bone works in the first place. Bone isn't dead material sitting in your body waiting to be measured. It's alive. It rebuilds itself constantly, based on the stress you put it under. A principle scientists call Wolff's law. Push a bone hard enough, often enough, and it thickens, densifies, grows reinforced ridges exactly where the pressure hits. Which means a skeleton isn't just a skeleton. It's a lifelong fitness log, written in calcium instead of ink. And when researchers led by Alison McIntosh read that log on women who lived across 6,000 years of early farming life in Central Europe, it told a story nobody expected. If you're the kind of person who likes finding out the version of history you were taught was quietly wrong, this channel exists for exactly that. Subscribe before we get to the part that actually broke the old narrative. Because here's where it gets uncomfortable for the textbooks. For most of the 20th century, the accepted picture of prehistoric life was simple. Men hunted, women gathered, and minded the fire. Physically easy work, biologically natural. That's the story in the museum dioramas. It's the story in the illustrations. And it turns out, it's mostly a story someone made up. Start with the most unglamorous task imaginable, grinding grain. Before mills existed, turning grain into flour meant hours a day, leaning your full body weight into a stone tool called a quern, dragging it back and forth, over and over, for an entire adult lifetime. Historical records point to this being primarily women's labor. Do that math across decades and you get exactly the kind of upper body density Cambridge found. Nobody called it resistance training, but that's what it was. Then add hauling water and firewood, sometimes for miles, sometimes multiple trips a day. Add carrying children, for years, often while carrying supplies at the same time. Studies of living hunter-gatherer groups show women routinely carrying loads that are a serious percentage of their own body weight. Add hide processing, scraping, stretching, and working tough animal skin into usable leather, a task documented in many societies as primarily female and physically brutal on the forearms and shoulders. None of that alone was the twist, though. The twist is bigger, and it's the part the old model really can't survive. In 2020, archaeologists excavating a 9,000-year-old burial site in the Andes, called Willamaya Pachixa, found something they weren't expecting. A young adult buried with a full big-game hunting kit, projectile points, animal processing tools, positioned exactly the way hunter burials are positioned. When they ran the skeletal analysis, the hunter was female. That single burial sent researchers back through the archives to re-examine older big-game hunter burials across the Americas, using rigorous skeletal sex testing instead of assuming gender from grave goods. What they found: somewhere between 30 and 50% of those hunter burials were women. Let that sit for a second. For decades, the rule in archaeology was simple. Hunting tools in a grave equals a male hunter. No further analysis needed. That assumption wasn't built on hard evidence. It was built on the cultural expectations of 20th century researchers, projected backward onto people who never had a say in how their bones would be interpreted. And it's not just ancient burials confirming this. Contemporary hunter-gatherer groups, like the Agta of the Philippines, have been directly observed with women hunting large game using bows, frequently while simultaneously handling childcare, directly contradicting the idea that hunting and parenting were mutually exclusive by necessity. There's also a physical demand that almost never makes it into this conversation at all: pregnancy and childbirth. Done without modern medicine, repeated multiple times across a life, layered directly on top of daily manual labor. If we're measuring physical endurance, That alone should have ended the passive cavewoman stereotype decades ago. Now, before this swings too far the other way, researchers are careful here, and so should we be. This isn't every prehistoric woman was a secret elite athlete. Physical demands varied by environment, technology, and era, the same way activity levels vary across populations today. What the evidence actually supports is more specific, and arguably more damning to the old model. This labor was the normal baseline, not an exceptional outlier. And it goes deeper than hunting and grinding grain. Pottery making required kneading and working heavy clay for hours. Weaving on manual looms demanded sustained upper body strength across entire working lives. These tasks don't photograph as dramatically as a mammoth hunt, so they never made it into the popular imagination. But skeletally, they left the exact same kind of permanent, measurable evidence behind. Here's the detail that might be the most surprising of all. When researchers compare the strength gap between male and female skeletons across different eras, that gap appears smaller in some earlier populations than in later agricultural and industrial ones, which suggests the strength difference we treat as a fixed biological constant today may actually be, in part, a product of history, of who got assigned which labor, generation after generation, not pure biology. So, were cavewomen stronger than we think? The bones say yes, and not by a small margin. Women whose skeletons rival modern elite athletes. Women who likely hunted big game at rates far higher than anyone assumed. Women who ground grain, hauled water, processed hides, wove cloth, carried children, and gave birth, often all within the same years of their lives. The evidence was never missing. It was in the ground, in the density of the bone, the whole time. We just weren't asking it the right questions.